Welcome back, audience. Hope you're doing good, as always. In this video, I want to talk a little more about the use of consciousness, a little more about state control and frame control in order to accomplish anything you want, accomplish anything you want, and resolve any type of challenge that you have. It's always going to boil down to the state control and frame control. Frame control is anything that to do with the mind and body. State control, everything's to do with your soul, with your heart. Now, that includes alchemy and some rudimentary forms of magic. And the way the world works in the soul, which works with more of a infinite or unlimited capacities of consciousness, and the mind and the body that works with the finite and limited um, facets of consciousness. So there's something that's unlimited and something that's limited. States are unlimited, and the things and arrangements of your desires in the world are limited. So there's this unlimited world and limited world, state control, frame control. Now, I talked a lot about in the previous video about alchemy. It is a type of state control. It is a type of state control that, for example, it starts with the premise that at the basis is peace and bliss, and this is where your actually consciousness wants to fall back onto naturally. So, for example, if you sit in one place and you just observe yourself, you may find some tension in your body. You apply attention there, and the background of it, awareness of the background, and attention on the tension. And there's a type of play and a game that you learn how to in order to resolve that tension, and that tension always resolves into something that feels good, and that's pretty much the point. You want to zero yourself out, so to speak. And to me, this is something that I have to do regularly, and I have occasions where that becomes sort of like automatic. State control. Okay? There's one thing I want to say about state control is that the biggest problem that you're going to have is when you have an intention to move into the state, or perhaps you remember from the past a specific state that you want to reproduce. The biggest problem you're going to have is doubt. And the way it works, it arises as self-evaluation. It comes in and says, you're not in that state, right? And sort of it takes measure. And in the world of states, time, or the tools of time, which is logics, has no place there. That is misappropriated logics. It's evaluating itself, taking measures. And that's exactly what stops you from entering the state. Okay? So, I like to use the word courage and surrender. The word surrender is exactly about a disabling that mechanism of doubt that comes in and starts measuring your state. If you apply that surrender, that openness to that intent that tries to measure the state and says like, well, you're not in this, then the state starts sort of sliding through, and that's the part of the infinite world where it is a qualitative rather than a quantitative world. I said word for some reason, but logos. And so that's the unlimited world, and therefore the logics or self-evaluation has no place there. Okay. And on the other side, on the other side, you have courage, which is you will require to place attention somewhere where there's fear or whatever, like any kind of less than positive state, and the surrender on the other side to disable that doubt. And then you sort of your conscience is going to slide and move into the state that your mind doesn't really have any control over. Okay. So there's this art of how to have a state control. The base state is peace, bliss, and then there are versions of that corresponding to whatever need you have in life to be in a specific state in order to accomplish a specific task. So there's this world of states, which is actually without that, nothing that you do in the world really matters. All your accomplishments are empty and has momentary pleasure. Okay? But state control, it creates joy, enjoyment. And for no particular reason whatsoever, just because you moved into that state. I mean, and you want to live in that peace and bliss as your basis of your reality, and anything that comes in the way of your peace and bliss must be worked through the state control, and that is the true meditation. As you can see, it has nothing to do with the mind, it's nothing to do with the methods, nothing to do with techniques, nothing to do with specificity, because this is dynamic. I'm not telling you that it's going to be between the eyes or in the heart or whatever. It is just the point in the circle, and that's all you got, and it's all you need in order to learn of how to control your state. And most challenges in the state is usually the corrupt masculine, corrupt feminine energies that usually come up as a form of hate or a form of lust, if you will. And then there's two branches of hate, two branches of lust. We don't need to go into that. And you don't even need to know any of that nomenclature, as long as you are, because you see how the qualitative the qualitative the qualitative quality, I suppose, or the qualitative aspect of this world does not allow you to quantify it. It's like music, right? Like, how do you quantify music? You can quantify music, but without without some quality of infinity and spectrum is impossible. right? So that's the world of emergence of the form, the world of infinite. And this is what I've been pointing at, that state control is, the first thing that you got to make sure. And of course, as you go through life, as you meet the people, as you see the things, and these can affect you, and people call them triggers, they are there for that work, for that state control. And you keep on alchemizing, and you remain in some quality of peace and bliss despite of all of these energies around you. And it comes to the point where your natural tendency is to take these energies that are incoherent and make them into the coherent. This is just what you do. And it's sort of almost like a covert exorcism. Any kind of incoherent energy, which is a type of demon, are automatically made coherent in a state control. Okay? And that is alchemy and theurgy. I've looked at material on the theurgy, and most of it is. I have not found any good material that would talk about what a theurgy really is. And theurgy is actually evoking a specific state of consciousness that is almost like alive and musical and moving. Okay, that's what the real theurgy is. It's the magic of your soul. It's the magic that anything that comes from the infinite, that is alive, and only from there you could use, because then you have a quality, then you can create and give it a form, and that form will have that quality, right? That's how you want to create. Anything that you create without that quality first that you've created, it's just not going to be having that quality. It's just going to look good, it's going to produce pleasure but not joy. And that just brings me to another side, right? So joy is something that can only be accomplished through the state control, and never going to be accomplished through the frame control, which is the mind and the body. Birds agree with me. Now, frame control. Going to the frame control. Now, frame control, the mind and body are actual tools. When you're no longer identified with the body or the mind, you still look at the mind and the body as a type of like live entities, right? Because they are, but they're very cause and effect, responding to cause and effect. That's in the framework, right? Of course, it responds to the state control, because the quality of your cells and your quality of brain depends on the kind of state they are immersed. But then, in order to accomplish something in life, you have to control the frame as well, because you want to accomplish something. It looks specific like that, and you go out to take specific action in your imagination and in the body, in the physical, in order to accomplish that. That's a frame control. Okay, because just having a good state control, you can create these amazing states of consciousness, and but if they don't translate into some form, then that's all they're going to be, right? Not really taking any form. But that's not the point of life. This is why there's this vertical development that I've talked about. That is your capacity to control states and access any kind of states as it's necessary. At first, you access the zero out state, which is just peace and bliss and an infinite and eternal state, just by having one goal of always placing your attention and becoming aware of the background of anything that comes into your energy that is not ideal. And so you play with that. That's alchemy. Then the side of theurgy is when you move in a specific state. Okay? And that is, of course, they're all have like these 7 strings of the instrument, like those frequencies, but how you play with them, it could be so specific to you. And because it's such an alive thing, it's going to be very specific. But specific state will help you with a specific situation, right? And so in order to accomplish that, you will have a capacity to move to specific state to accomplish that. Okay? And I don't want to go expand too much on the theurgy here in these specific states, but it usually is something like you experience something and it was like, wow, that was really cool, you know, and that specific state has, you can name that specific state. Now, in order to, when you're going to try to reproduce that specific state that you had experienced before, your mind is going to be may compare, and it will be in the way. Mind has to disconnect from that, and you just do a pure sliding into that state, and and having no judgment and trusting, because that's where the faith comes in. When we talk about states, the doubt has no place, because there's no limit there. If you want to enter that state, it's available. It requires your courage and surrender, and it's there for you. But if your mind is keep on measuring it, it's going to be very difficult because it's stopping it. But if you take the mind out, you will slide in that state, and because you're not going to be comparing it, you're going to move into that state. It's not going to be exactly like that, but it's going to have its quality, right? It's going to be, and of course it cannot be exactly like that because it's alive. But that quality of that state that you've experienced before, it's there. It's like, oh, you recognize it. Oh, it's this. But it's moving, it's playing, it's doing its thing, and I know this quality, okay? It's like, oh yeah, that's the state. But you see, whenever your mind comes in, it's like, that's the state. That it tries to freeze it, and it's no longer alive. This is why when you dance, you don't keep on placing labels on your experience, right? Like, that's not what you do. After that, you may do that, but it's already gone. But while it's happening, the mind is out. It's not the mind's jurisdiction. State control is not mind's jurisdiction. This is the ring, one ring that rules them all. It's this capacity of point in a circle, of evict this self-evaluation of the mind in your soul, and be able to move into the timeless states easily, and be a master of your state control. Now, then you practice, you move to the states like that through the theurgy, which is an evocation of the state, and sometimes people, that's an evocation of the angelic and divine beings. You call them beings because it's alive. That state is alive, but it's a feeling inside you. You can call it whatever you want, but you're going to be experiencing the feeling. You can call whatever you want. You can call it pixies. You can call it angels. You can call it whatever you want. But it's a feeling that it's alive, moving, dancing type of presence. Now, later when you're in frame control, the state control may happen automatically. This is why this art of having programming your frame control to match the state control, because like if you are imagining something in particular state, when you're going to be doing that thing, that state is going to be automatically sort of tied together, and so there's going to be very little management that you need to do because it's just happening. But that art of weaving that state with that form, that's thaumaturgy. That's the world of magic, the magic of the mind now. Theurgy, magic of the soul, just creating that state, because there's a degree of intent there, but it's that intent is not specific yet. It is just like intent of evoking the quality of the feeling, and then you got to link it to the form, because as a person you can use that for anything. You can use this to imagine music, imagine a piece of art, imagine a business, imagine whatever you want to imagine yourself linking to that state. Will manifest. Basically, all you will need to do is to move to that specific state, and the mind will already know what to do, right? And so this is how you connect those worlds. And I talked about it before. I call them eon, kairos, and then chronos, right? The world of time, the world of this primordial sort of the form of infinity, which is a sort of a primordial time. It's neither time, neither infinite. It's like music, right? It has a quality, but there's a primordial quantity that is sort of being born. That's kairos. And then chronos is something that is very specific, time, space. It has its own loci, it has its own thing, right? So all of these qualities and quantities in one cohesive experience that you're trying to create. Okay? Now, most of the time, based on like what I'm observing and what I'm seeing in my world and what I see in other people, it usually is the same problems. There's no different problems. If you are working on a state control, you're not going to use your mind or the body to experience joy. You're not going to use your mind and the body to pacify that negative feeling that is inside of you, which means you're not going to take any actions on the evil. Otherwise, if you do not do the state control, you will rely upon the external actions to create that pleasure in your soul. And the pleasure in your soul is evil. Only joy belongs into your soul. Because when you get off on, subduing the innocence, which that gives you kind of pleasure in your heart, right? Then it's all sorts of perversions, sacrifice. There is whatever that breaks taboo. That's what ego wants, right? It cannot derive pleasure unless it's abusing somebody one way or another. And another side of ego is being abused, which is, or enjoying being abused. I shouldn't use that word enjoying, or deriving pleasure from being abused or abusing. Okay? This is all invasion of the mind and the body in your soul, and that's evil. If you do the state control, you won't need the body or the mind. to be producing that pleasure, which is coherence in your consciousness, because your consciousness is always seeking coherence, which is a mix of peace and bliss. It's coherence in everything. It always wants that. That's just fundamental drive of consciousness. It always seeks coherence. It gets into the situations that are incoherent and looking for the ways to find the coherence. If you do not do the state control, which is alchemy and theurgy, you may still rely on magic, and might to create those conditions that that allows you to feel that pleasure. And this is, by the way, I don't know if you've seen the movie Eyes Wide Shut. They depict very clearly of how you gain power, which is manifestation power, when in your soul, whether it's pleasure or joy, you have certain a capacity over the world and manifesting. This is why in all of these cultures all over the world, including Mayan culture, in the late Mayan culture, originally, no, they were not doing that. They were using, state control and made sure that all the energies are coherent in the heart through the pyramids and working in the pyramids, and all these shamans, they knew what they're doing. The late Mayan culture, when that left, they started doing dark magic and all sorts of dark shit and sacrifice and stuff like that. And this is exact same you can see in Europe and in these traditions, right? There's two ways to gain power. One is the real way, the Christ, or the Antichrist. And the reason it's called Christ or the Antichrist, because actually, just a side note, metaphysically, if you look at something and how the energies move, and when you have this toroidal field going in the infinite reciprocating field, it creates this sideways 8, that's his infinity sign. And then the mind above and the body below, that's dual world, and it creates the 8. That's the symbol of time. That's, you have like that hourglass, the symbol of time. Those two together must work in order for you to have complete cohesive and coherent experience in this world and playing this game right. When you're trying to compensate for the lack of your state control through imagination or action in the physical world, to force the reality to pacify your ego, it produces a certain type of light, like I call it false light, that dark passion, right? That pleasure in your heart. I'm specifically using the words right now to apply the correct meaning as much as possible, and I'm not using the words like, I'm specifically separating the word joy and pleasure. Joy, everything that's born out of the state control. Pleasure, everything that's born out of your mind and frame control. Okay? Now, what happens, what I'm trying to say here is that when a person is doing something evil and receiving pleasure in their heart, it has that light, but it's not stemming from the source, so it's kind of disconnected. And this is why you see it at the top and the bottom, and that's like that dual sort of lightsaber that was depicted in Star Wars, for example, right? It's not connected. There's one light on the end and there's another light on the end, but it's not connected in the middle, right? And so that's why it's false light. But it does have a limited authority over the reality. This is why by doing this eyes wide shut type of ceremonies and rituals and bullshits, they do receive that pleasure, and through that pleasure, whatever they imagine, all these rhetorics, all these movements that are can produce more of opportunity for them to do more of that evil, would have an effect. And so therefore, that's the real evil. Now, and that may have a gravity towards or on other people who like not really aware of that, but they're like addicted to things, addicted to pornography, addicted to sort of like light evil, as I call it. It's, you know, if somebody is molesting children in the church, that's a higher form of evil than somebody watching a porn, but it's still exact same thing, right? It's receiving pleasure where the joy is supposed to be. Okay, and but perhaps, you know, if you go all in on the evil, you have way more control over it than you just try, you know, to dabble into it, because then you can control it, and you can, because you're not gonna be able to keep on spiraling towards hell by doing more and more evil shit, because this is where the addiction leads you to, right? When the porn is no longer enough, and then, you know, trying to say, right? But the person is limited in that evilness and does a little bit of light evil, but that light evil functions as poison in their soul. And I know this because I'm speaking from the experience. Like, it does have the gravity on you, and I mean, a lot of people struggle with addiction, and that addiction has degrees. Whether you are, you know, doing some evil shit or minor evil shit, they're still evil. Anything that you do to pacify the negative feeling through the mind and the body, external world, is a type of evil. And which means that we've all been engaged into this. We've all done that. But the point that I'm trying to make is that ideally you want to do it once, and then you learn kind of the lesson. You know, I myself, sometimes I don't learn that quick. I need a few times before something in my system really clicks in and says, like, yeah, we already been there, done that. We know how it's going to end. Let's not go this way. Let's do some state control. And, you know, I don't know why I say let's, who's talking here, but anyway. But the point I'm trying to say is that state control is what's supposed to be used to align your state, not the frame control, right? I'm being very clear. Now, the problem may be that sometimes people go only in the state control, and then they forget the frame control, and then you have these happy, innocent, easily killed or used people because they have no frame. It's like turtle with no shell. We don't want that either. We don't want people just be all shell, you know, and no soul, and the mushy part would know. So we need everything in the right place. So therefore, pleasure must be in the right place. Okay? Because your mind and the body runs on pleasure. You know, it runs very well when your body is in the right state, but that's not enough. The body must move. It must do things. It must accomplish things. Your mind must accomplish things. It must do things. It still wants that hit. It still wants that reward, because that's the way they derive, you know, the completion in the temporal world. Temporary completion, temporary reward. Now, in the soul, once you have that joy through the state control, there's that background, you know. And so what there's one point in the movie Deadpool where he gone through this excruciating experience, and that was demonstration of alchemy, of breaking down the pain into joy or bliss. And this is what happened to that character in the movie. He ended up having sense of humor about everything except one thing. But I'm not gonna go into this. But he had sense of humor even because he had no concept of pain anymore. The internal soul pain was kind of gone, except one thing. But anyway, that's besides the point. So there. That's the importance of the state control. Now, talking about the frame control, pleasure has its place, but it's not to pacify the internal feelings of lack. They are needed for the mind and the body to work as a well-oiled machine. You must you shouldn't like must, but that's how it works. The pleasure must be earned. Okay, so this is why, like, if your body needs to feel good, you do some exercise, some action, right? If your mind, you do some accomplishment there. There are setting goals. Everything in the world of mind and the body still continues and working the same way as it was before, because you still need to survive and thrive in the physical reality. And without the frame control, that's not going to happen. So your mind is still going to be receiving temporary moments of pleasure on top of the joy that you already feel in the soul. And then the body is also going to be receiving that pleasure on top of the joy that you already feel in the soul. But that pleasure comes in momentarily, and then again, there's this drive, success, pleasure, drive, success. But it's all happening now on top of the enjoyment in your soul. And you also not doing any kind of evil shit anymore, but you're still using the mind, you're still striving, trying to accomplish something, but not for the purposes of pacify your soul, right? Like, you're not doing it to prove a point to somebody, you're not doing it to pacify some lack in your soul, because that's going to end up being evil, because you're going to have to steal that energy from somebody else. Anyway, I don't want to get into this too much, but anything that you do in the frame control world where you're supposed to be using state control is going to end up being evil, whether it's like a minor evil, which would be some form of light addiction, or super evil, which is like the intense and everything consuming addiction, which is usually the people are attracted to power positions, who get to abuse the innocence, and that's the way they get off on the fact of that, right? But it's just like an extreme addiction. It's the same thing. It's just ego overdeveloped, and ego still has like just a minor development. Okay, we're dealing with all the same stuff, whether you're dealing with somebody who is a pedo in some organization, or a person who is addicted to porn. Is exact same thing. I mean, the approach is exact same thing. You're gonna need some state control. If you're dealing with a person about any kind of reason, and you can see the ego is coming up, the way to deal with it is still going to be through the state control and the frame control. You're going to have to control the frame, not let them to get away with that intent and action, because you have to stop the people who are trying to rape kids. But on the other end, you must not also be fueled by the same type of hate. You must control that state in your heart, so there's no hate there, so you don't really want to kill a person, but perhaps put it in jail and give it a chance for the soul to come out, because there is such thing as people do get over addictions, and it is possible. you know. Some addictions may require some powerful exorcism or and whatnot, but that's also state control. You see, it will always require some form of state control and the frame control. And this is the game, really, against the demiurge or the ego. That's the game that we're playing. We're not playing game against the people, but the people may carry these energies, and we must know that it's not about destroying the person and the evil is going to go away. That's not how it's going to work. But you have to prevent from them, having their ends met, right? Like that thing that they're addicted to needs to be cut off. But that's not enough, because if you don't allow the state control where they could no longer need to do this and realize that there is another way, and through the state control perhaps other people can help them to enter that state that they were looking for outside, but now they can see that it's there without them doing the evil shit. So then the ego dissolves because it sees no purpose of existing, because the state that was looking for is no longer need to do it because it's already there. And so there's this transformation that happens in the consciousness. Okay, so run on joy and earn your pleasure. Run on joy and earn your pleasure. You run on joy by learning state control, and you earn your pleasure by learning frame control. And that's all your skills, habits, and like. And everything is put in the right positions. There's a vertical development, there's a horizontal development of consciousness. Okay? And like this, you can, maybe in the future videos I'll get a little bit deeper into specifics, but that's in general to understand what's happening here, what is this thing life, and how to actually have real success and not have that false success out of lack. You see, I talked about this in the previous video. There is absolutely real success that does not come from the emptiness. Okay? Anyway, so that's enough for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.